And this officer leans forward and looks over at him and said, "Hey, little fella, how you doing?" And he looks at him and says, "Shut up, you stupid idiot." Didn't know him from Adam.
Hello and welcome to the Salty Sarge podcast. We are back. We have one Salty Sarge with us.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's good to have everybody here.
We missed him last week, but we're glad to have him right back. All right. And we have a very, very special guest. I would like to call him Salty Sarge Sr., but you call him Dad.
That's right, Salty Sarge Sr. He's here with us, so this is going to be a good episode, I feel like. It's like we're going to have a good time here.
Yes, we are. And so the first thing I wanted to do is can you give an overview of what you have done for law enforcement and about the time frames that you worked there?
Well, I started with the police department in 1984. Mm-hmm. I worked in patrol for, 5 or 6 years. I was transferred to training division, did some time at the training division. Then I got promoted to lieutenant, went back to patrol, spent 3 years in patrol as a supervisor, then went to the crime scene unit, spent 3 years or so in the crime scene unit, then went to investigations, a few years in investigations, and then I got wise and went back to patrol. That's where I spent 5 more years in patrol, and then got the graviest job of ever doing community relations. And that's where I ended my career doing community relations. Probably 15 years in patrol, I would say, total.
But total years of law enforcement total?
Oh, 37.
37 years. Okay.
27 years on the city and then 10 with the state.
And you did investigative work for them and stuff like that? Yes. Okay. So you have a plethora of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I've seen your picture up with the city or with the city we work with, and so a lot of people question that a lot. Especially if you're the rookie going through this program, and they look at me and they go, "Hey, who's that?" And you're like, "Well, I don't know who that is," because I didn't want to say, but I knew who it was because he was
same last name, but that doesn't mean anything.
And what's bad is the first day of the academy, the supervisor comes down. He's like, "Fine, where's so and so at?" "Right here, sir. Yeah, your father was my main instructor. You have big boots to fill." And I'm just like, "Great."
Yeah.
Like 5 minutes into it. Awesome. That's perfect. Yeah, great. And everybody's looking at me like, because now it's a big deal. They call it legacies now, which I don't know what we called them. It was like second gen and stuff, but they call them like, so they're like, oh, because my recruits are like, "Oh, you're a legacy." And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, I'm not a legacy, but anyway.
So we have discussed about the upbringing and kind of the reasons why Salty Sarge has steered his life in the way he has and became a law enforcement officer. But I'm curious, what was the inspiration for you to make that decision and jump into law enforcement?
Well, my granddad, which is the Salty Sarge's great granddad, he was a game warden in law enforcement, and then spent many years doing that, and he was also in politics for a while. And then my dad went to work for the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and he spent 3 or 4 years there with the patrol. And so from those two law enforcement backgrounds, kind of gave me the interest for it. And then, in about 84, I was needing a job, and I thought they were hiring, and let me tell you something. It was $6.49 an hour. I took a pay cut to go to work on the police department, but it was worth it. It was well worth it.
That's awesome. Do you have any questions right now?
I mean, I didn't know. So whenever you started, you went through the academy and everything. Like, what was your first assignment? Like, whenever you got out of the training program, like the FTO program, which I got a hold of his manual. I had another friend of mine have his manual. It was actually it was all handwritten.
Really?
Yeah, we don't do that now. It's all even in my era. You could still write it, but mostly was typed. They're called daily observation reports, but the manual was thick too. I mean, because all that writing. Mm-hmm. But and we made a lot of the same mistakes. So that's what was funny. But that book was referred to as, they call it the LA model of training. So the LA Police Department came out to develop a program, and that's kind of what everybody kind of went off of. But it's the same qualifications that I had. So Mike, you did good. You made it through the program. Where was your first assignment at? Like, was it, what shift were you on essentially?
Well, my first assignment out of the FTL program was in the South Division. And I'll never forget my first night on the street. When you get in that car by yourself, it's third shift. I am scared half to death.
So you wrote third shift.
Third shift
I
for
thought you were second shift.
I was third shift for a few weeks, and then after that, of course, I was scared to death. That first time you go in service is just like the most. I don't know. It was awesome, but I spent a couple of weeks down there in
That's
the
where you
Santa Fe
park right in
division.
front of the house. You just don't care. I'm not being graded, but anyway, that's the inside.
Then I moved on to when the assignments came out. I went to what was called the Central Division. I spent probably 6 months at the Central Division, which was, as you call it, the east side of town.
So you rode out there, and you told me a story one time when y'all rode partners out there.
Yes,
but no other divisions rode partners.
just the east side cars.
Just the east side.
2 man units.
And you went out there and you said there were a lot of bullet holes in the cars.
Well, from a guy who came from a small town, very naive, very. I'd never been in a bar in my life until I got on the police department as on duty.
And now you're podcasting.
And yeah, I'm podcasting from a bar. Boy, that's awesome. I've grown up a little bit.
That's your son.
Up a little bit. Anyway, anyway, so I was very naive, very new to all of this. I didn't cuss, didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do anything. Church going kid. And
I do every
all
bit
of
of
those
that.
things. But anyway, so as I move forward, the first car I go into now, I was working on the central side of town, and one of the east side car's partner got hurt. And so they had to put someone with him. And because I was junior guy, they stuck me with this guy. Excellent officer, great officer. He quit and went somewhere else. But the first car that I got into from the east side, I'm walking out there to the car, and I'm getting into it. And on the passenger side by the spotlight, there's a bullet hole. And I'm like, what's that? And he says, what do you think it is? I said, it looks like a bullet hole. That's what it is. That happened last set. And I'm like, really? And so from then I got a new awakening as to really how dangerous law enforcement really was. I knew it was dangerous, but to see the bullet hole in the side of the car kind of lets you know, hey, there are people out there who don't like the police. And I didn't know that. And so that was, kind of an eye-opening experience. So, and then when you go through an apartment complex on the east side, they would all take their guns out of their holsters, hold them in their lap, ready to go to gun battle. And I'm sitting over there like, ooh-da.
See, I actually did that too. In certain places I didn't.
Yeah.
Because you had
Of course, I got yelled at. Well, get your gun. I'm like, why would I have my gun out?
I think I know exactly where that's at too, because you told me the name of it. But I've been in. I finished up a gun battle in that spot where I almost was shot by another officer that was engaging in a gunfight. But anyway, in that same location. But yeah, we had words afterwards. But as I was seeing rounds fly across the pavement. But anyway, no here nor there. So when you were a kid, you watched a show called Adam
12.
So was that when you went out there on the street and you're working as a young officer, was it like that at all?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
Were the scenarios like that?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them were kind of silly. I'll tell you, the closest show that I watched as even a young officer was Hill Street Blues. I'm telling you, that show was dead on because they had boring nights. And, so many nights back in those days, there were boring nights. But they weren't all boring. But there were boring nights.
Yeah, and I remember, so he would come home when he worked Southside. He'd come home and eat. And that would come on like at 9 or 10 o'clock, wouldn't it? And I would hear it come on or hear the music to it and that tone. And I would come in there and sit with them and watch the show. And then I'd go back to bed. He let me come out there and watch it. But those are memories I'll never forget. But I do remember that because, it's just shows like that I watched, as a kid. And then growing up, I'd watch the cop shows and stuff like that to see, I really want to do this. But he had a recruiting video that he had on VHS that somebody made. And that was the video that I really, really kept me. I would show it to everybody, all my friends, but this is what my dad does, this is what I'm going to do. And it was that one recruiting video that one guy made you, that civilian guy, that had like the license sirens, and it said like, you can make this choice. You showed me, it was a VHS tape. And it was a special video y'all made.
That was made by someone on the police department.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but
for training.
Yeah,
it was for an academy.
And then whenever he was at the training center, I would go with him, and I met all these other guys, and then they had this machine. It was like a simulator. They call it the FATS machine.
That's machine.
And
Simulator.
You actually shot these rounds like it was like black powder, I guess, because we reloaded them, and we would go in there with a revolver and it was a revolver and another pistol, and I was probably like 10 I was probably about 10, probably, because you got promoted when I turned about 10, so it's right before that, yeah. And we go down there, and we're in there. I'm there for you. We're in this office in Marilla, and people are like, "What are you doing?" Like, "Oh, we're gonna do the fast thing." "Oh, okay, no big deal." And then that doesn't exist now. They don't even use anything like that now. But it was so cool. It was like a screen so I mean, if him and my mom didn't think that I was gonna do this job, they're crazy, because all the events that transpired, or when I would mention ride-alongs,
I started, not to mention riding around in the chase car during pursuit driving. I mean, you have to do
did
that.
that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm an instructor now, and my son asked me to go, and I told him, I said, when you turn 10, you're going. I said, we're going to go out there. You're going to jump in the car too. It's bound to happen for him too.
Yeah.
It just is. I don't know what else
like
to
it's a
say.
family thing.
I mean, I just hope my daughter doesn't do it.
Yeah.
But either way, if they don't do it, it's not going to, hurt my feelings. But if they do, that's fine. But there's so many people right now on our department that are the guys I've worked with, that their sons are coming up. Mm-hmm. And I got to train some of them, and it's just scary. It's a scary thought that you see them as little boys and in training or something, or you meet their dads and you come across them in a ride along, and then here they are in a police car with you, and now they're your partner. It's like, oh my gosh, you want to take.
Yeah, I'm sure the generation before you felt the same way with you coming up.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, I think
I know one particular officer did. Just one short story. We were. Salty Sarge had been riding with me down, just doing some errands, and one of my friends and I had worked an extra job, and he had a check for me. And so we had agreed that while I'm on my errands, I'll meet him somewhere. And so I met him, and he's in a police car. And so we pull up in my car, and my personal car, and Salty Sarge is in the front seat. And this guy says, "Hey, how's it going?" And of course, Salty Sarge is sitting over there, kind of minding his own business. And this officer leans forward and looks over at him and said, "Hey, little fella, how you doing?" And he looks at him and says, "Shut up, you stupid idiot." Didn't know him from Adam. And the funny thing is, that old officer remembers that to this day. And it's a very fond memory.
And he would say, "Hey, that stupid idiot." He would just laugh and go, "Hey, what's up?" Like, that's how we knew him. Like, I mean, and I had seen him. I don't even know. What is he doing? Is he still around?
He's still around.
Yeah.
I just saw him a few months ago at the fair.
And then I went to, we got to work some jobs together. We worked at this mall, and actually he got me on at this mall right after. And that was pretty fun, because a lot of people thought we were brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, "Hey, are you two brothers?" Like, "No, that's my phone." Like, "What?"
That's
"Oh,
awesome.
wow, that's cool."
I was pretty young back in the day.
And there was a situation though where a guy like comes outside this store, and he's like beating the crap out of this guy, and he's just like, "What the heck's going on?" Man,
I don't think that's the...
yeah, I was just standing. He looks over, he goes, "That's a problem," and he like tries to address it, and then he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "That's the security guy. Like, I know him." But anyway,
the story I remember about us working the mall was there was 3 or 4 of us working. It was around the holidays, and we were standing outside this jewelry store, and there was like 3 of us, 3 officers, uniformed officers, talking, and I'm standing there with them, and I hear a commotion behind me, and I turn around and I look, and in the floor of this jewelry store are 2 people. The security guy from the jewelry store is on top of a lady.
Well,
he was trying to steal stuff.
Well, it's from the major department store. She came out. And
Well, that's where he was fighting her, was
Right.
at my feet.
Yeah.
So I turn around and I'm like, he goes, "Can you give me a hand here?" So I start helping this fight, and the other guys are just standing there, just oblivious to anything going on around them. And finally, I yell up enough to get them their attention, and we get this girl in custody. Yeah,
Pretty funny. Yeah.
3 officers watching another one fight.
Oh, you're just sitting there watching him. I was like, "Oh, he's got this. It's all good." He's like, "No, I need your help over here. Like, get over here." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever. It's all right." But I do remember a famous story of a fight in a bathroom, though, of a department store.
Yeah, there was.
Were you younger at that one? Were you pretty young on that one, or was you?
Yeah, that was probably in 1980. it had to be 88, 87, 88. I've been on about 3 or 4 years. There used to be an old, can I say the name of the store?
A Target.
It was a Target.
Yeah.
Target store
It's not
on the south
anymore.
side of the city that's not there anymore. We had got a call there on a shoplifter. Me and this other guy, another officer. And so we both go over there, and we get there, and they tell us
Was that your best friend? Best bud?
He was a good friend of mine.
Okay.
Yeah, little guy. And so they tell us he's in the bathroom. So we go running in the bathroom because he's supposedly flushing the evidence down. Well, first of all, he's in the bathroom. So we go in there and we can see him in the crack of the door in the bathroom. And the security guard tells us, hey, and we're like, we don't need to get him out. Let's just think about this. How are we going to do this? And the security guard says, we got to hurry. This guy's flushing the evidence down the toilet. Oh my gosh, now we got to get in a hurry. And we could not get the door open. So the only idea that we came up with, which wasn't that great of an idea looking back, but it worked, was this officer friend of mine was a little smaller guy. And he said, well, just boost me over the top. So I boosted him over the top and kind of gave him a shove. So he goes over and lands on this guy's back. Now, keep in mind, the guy's back he landed on is about 6'2" or 6'3". He's a big guy. And so now I'm standing outside the toilet. The whole thing is shaking. The walls are shaking. They're screaming and hollering going on inside. And finally, it's like, I can't do this anymore. So I was able to grab a hold of that door, and between them shaking and rattling, I pulled that door open, and they came out of there, and it was like this officer was on the back of a bull. I mean, he just come out of a bull chute, man. And they hit the ground, and the fight was on. But yeah, that's one funny story. My wife wanted those doors from that toilet for years when they tore that place down. That didn't happen.
So whenever you were out there working, I mean, did people fight you guys a lot more than what you say they would now?
Probably not.
You
as
see
much.
videos now where people just walk up to an officer and they just start just cussing them out. I'm videoing you. What are you going to do about it? I mean, was it like that in your generation?
I think the difference in the yesterday generation and current generation was respect. I think we had a lot more respect from even the bad guys. And I don't know if that was just something that was earned or they feared. I don't know. Because back in the day, the Metro had a reputation like you would not believe. And I was taking this a biker one time to jail. Of course, back in those days, anytime a biker passed through, if he's flying his colors, he probably was going to go to jail, if not the hospital. That's just the way it was. They knew it. We knew it. Anyway, this guy.
We're talking about a gang affiliated, like an outlaw
gang outlaw biker.
an outlaw.
This wasn't Grandpa and was no bad.
Which that's what we call them today. They're outlaw bikers. And at that time, the FBI had bought all the franchise to all their colors. And that was the thing, because I've done my research when I was in the unit of where I would go out and seek out members like that too. So at that time, they weren't allowed to do that because it was a franchise. It was petty.
Well,
and it later changed because of freedom of speech. But anyway,
in our town, it was disrespectful for them to fly their colors, basically. And I am specifically speaking outlaw gang members.
Okay, right.
Not outlaw bikers, outlaw gang members riding motorcycles.
So that you're in a law enforcement base.
Understands we're not talking about Grandpa out riding his Honda going down the road. This is bikers. We're talking about a dangerous gang.
Gang affiliated bikers. Yeah.
So this particular day, I had stopped him on traffic or something. I don't know. He's going to jail, and it was a mutual thing. It wasn't a problem. He wasn't fighting me or anything. But as we head down to the jail, he says, "Are you taking me to jail?" And I said, "Well, yeah, we got to go down to that jail. That's the only one we have." And he said, "Well, am I going to get on that elevator?" And I said, "Yeah, that's on the way up." And he says, well, I goes, I'm from California, and I heard about your elevator. He said, I'm not getting on that elevator. I started laughing. I'm like, it's on the way up. We got to get on the elevator. And so I get down to the jail, and he's getting ready to get out of the car. And he goes, I'm serious. I'm not getting on the elevator. I said, we ain't got no choice. So I get him out of the car, and it was almost a fight to get him to the elevator.
What's wrong with the elevator?
Well, he had heard stories about getting beat up in the elevator, specifically those type of gang-affiliated motorcycle biker riders.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely afraid of that. And so I took everything I could do to coax him to get on the elevator. Tell him, look, we're not, it's just me and you. There's not a group of us. You're not going to get beat up. And he finally got on that elevator, but it was almost a fight. And we rode up, and that was the end of that story. But, it's just I think back in those days, there was a lot more respect towards the Metro officers than there are today.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the reason is. We didn't go just crazy beating people up, but I will say that respect was earned. If you ran from the police back in those days, more than likely when you get caught, there's going to be a little problem there because you're already resisting arrest by running.
Mm-hmm.
So, and most of those ended in, little fights and tussles. And I think they knew that if they got out of line, they were going to get put back in place. And I think that helped us stay safer. And when I've had several talks about officers responding to threats and not being able to identify a problem when it's happening or being hesitant. Holding back, thinking I may get in trouble for this if I do something. Back in those days, we didn't worry about that. If something started, we got the hint of danger, we took action. I know one time Salty Sarge was talking to my wife about something, and he had made a comment that he had pulled his gun out when he was working and he pointed at somebody, which is normal for, police work. And later that night, my wife says, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that boy. She said, he's out there being crazy. He said, you never pointed your gun at anybody. You never took your gun out. And I looked at her and I said, look, it was every night.
Every stop.
Every night. My gun came out of the holster, and I cannot tell you how many times I pointed my gun at someone that deserved to have my gun pointed at them because they were a threat. Now, did I shoot them? No. I had a very fortunate career. I never had to use my firearm in the line of duty other than one time.
Some people, though, what they don't understand is, I draw my weapon on night shift. I worked night shift for several years, probably, I'd say more than 90% of my career I worked night shift. So you didn't know what was in that car. And I'm talking this is like 2 or 3 in the morning where you're going out and you're ground pounding an area that is known for extreme gang violence, drug activity, and they're trying to protect their area and their livelihood. So they look at you. They were raised to say police are bad. All police are bad. And you see it with their kids and how their culture, it was a culture thing. And they would listen to music that talked about it. I mean, it's just the way it was. And I knew that going into it, but I knew when I walked up to that car, there were a lot of times my gun was at my hip. It was already out of my holster because I wanted to have the jump on it, But now it's a little different now that I work daytime. I mean, I don't want to pull it out on soccer mom and people like that, but I know, when there could be a potential bad situation or not. But it was always, we weren't, and I've been fortunate enough too, where I haven't engaged like that. Come close several times, but I feel like I did preventative maintenance to prevent it from happening. But, so when you started and you got in your car, what kind of technology did you have? Did you have any? Did you have a radio?
We had a 4-channel radio. We had 3 divisions, and then we had the information unit. So we had four different channels of radio. We had, when I came to work, if you had a handheld radio, it's because you got to work early and was able to go grab one. There were many nights as a rookie, you didn't have a handheld radio. You were out there without one, and when you get out of the car, you told dispatch, hey, I'm out of the car, going to take a break. You don't have a radio. And so that was just how it was.
But they didn't have call boxes and stuff like that. Or
no, call boxes. There was still a few call boxes in the metropolitan area, but they weren't really used. I mean, they weren't operable.
We use a code that goes back in time. They call it 6-1.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a dispatcher will say, hey, can you 6-1 me? And that means to call them. And the reason why they would say that is there is call boxes throughout the metro.
Is that like the classic,
there's
noir, the 1930s, 40s
Well, I would
boxes?
say it was probably later than that. I would say because you had to go up. What would happen was a beat officer would go about his business walking,
Mm-hmm.
and he would go check in and go, hey, he'd say 6-1. And he'd say, hey, I'm over here. Anything good? Anything going on? No. Okay. And then he walked to his beat and walked to the next one, which I'm not saying it would be like a block away. It could be several blocks away. But when I got on, we still had beat officers. I mean, you had beat officers too that rode certain areas that walked the beat. When I say beat officer, because you have a patrolman that patrols in a car, and they used to call them scout patrol, and that's where that came from. And we call them scout cars.
Yeah.
Is what we did, because there was a scout, because scout patrol was the part of the division you were in. And that's what they call
Scout car.
Yeah,
They call it scout car division.
Yeah, you go out and you patrol, you scout the area. And that's what I always called it. Some supervisor, some young kid didn't know what that meant. Like, why do you say that? And I'm like, well, let me give you a history lesson on it. I mean, good Lord. It's just sad that we forget where we come from. And I feel like that when he said, we did things a little differently, and I had some older officers tell me, the reason why those guys did that, that's protecting you. Because when I got over there on that central part of the world, there was people that respected us because they knew that there were consequences for actions. And I'm not saying that we were Gestapo, okay? I'm just saying we were there to help you. We never questioned. When a call came out, I didn't know who called in. Sometimes it was the same fellow that would call in, and they got the same, what do you need, Tony? Yada, yada, yada. But a lot of times you don't know who's calling you. We don't care. Someone says, there's someone here with a gun and I need help. We all went without question, and we all went pretty fast. And we got to that house and like, hey, what do you need? We're here for you. And you're like, really? And a lot of times it was always, wah, wah, like, who said something about a gun? I just said that to get you here faster. You're like, really? But, the next time they called for the 50th time, you still went to their house. We never would like, oh, let's blow it off. I mean, that's just what you did as an officer. And even that's what they did. And he told me, when I came out, he goes, listen, sometimes you're not always going to do police work. You might have to like fix someone's garage door or their cable, or you might have to tell a bedtime story to a kid. You never know. And, or give money to somebody, and I always remember that because that's what I had to do. I mean, there was some old guy that couldn't get his TV to work and he called the police. And he's like, I cannot figure this out. And it's like, okay, let's see what we can do. And there's 5 of us in there trying to figure out this date's rabbit ears,
Yeah.
But he told me a story about an officer that was younger that fixed a garage door for a guy. And you'd called him over there or whatever. But
what is actually a TV for an old lady?
Oh, okay.
That's a TV, yeah, for an old lady. Good friend of yours, actually.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, his son's on the department.
His son is on the department, yeah.
We got a call over there on some kind of trouble. I don't know what it was. And this lady needed her TV fixed. And I'm not a TV guy, but I knew a guy who was. So I called our guy over there, and within 15 minutes, it was all fixed and perfect, and she was happy. So we went on our way.
Yeah, and then what about the time... Let's see, where you were on a call, were you a supervisor when you ran into a relative of yours maybe? Like what happened in that situation?
Yeah, that's kind of a weird story.
That's a funny story though. But
it is a funny story. It is a funny story, but yeah, I just moved back to patrol from the investigations. So the guys I was working around in the, I guess it would be kind of the south part of town. Central South, downtown area South. Anyway, they didn't really know me. I had like 5 guys that were assigned to me, or 6 guys.
What was the age gap? Would you say like years of service compared to theirs?
I think every guy that worked for me at that point had less than 2 years on.
Oh wow!
So
you had all those.
One of them, I actually asked him, "Do you even shave?"
Yeah.
I mean, he just looked
he's
so
coming
young.
up on, this is what's bad is I know that guy, and he's coming up on 25.
Yeah.
25 years. But anyway.
So anyway, this call comes out, and I don't really pay attention. I had relatives on this side of town from back in, a few years earlier. And I didn't really pay attention to it. And so I get a call from one of those guys, hey, can you come over to our call? We got a problem. We need a supervisor. I'm like, okay. So I go over there, and as I'm pulling up, it's starting to look familiar. Like, oh, okay, I know I got relatives over here. And so as I get out of my car, I look down the street, and there stands my aunt. Actually, she's a cousin, but she's way older than me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's she doing over here? And she sees me about the same time I see her, and she comes running down the street. And so she runs up. Of course, the officers are trying to stop her. Like, what are you doing? That's our boss. What are you doing? And so I talked to her, and she tells me that her son, who's kind of a
SIG-8. We call it SIG-8. Yeah.
He's a SIG-8.
That's like a middle.
He's in the house, and
outfield.
she's afraid the police are going to kill him. And so about this time, those other officers are looking at me like, how do you know these people? Oh, great.
How do you explain that one?
Everybody has black sheep in their infirmary. Come on. And so she asked me if I can go up and talk to him. And they say, yeah, see if you can talk to him. He's in there in the house. Well, they didn't tell me he was in the attic above the porch. So I go walking up onto the porch, and I knock on the door, and I say, hey, so-and-so, are you in there? And he says, hey, cousin so-and-so, is that you?
Was you able to talk him out of there?
Yeah, I actually talked him out of the attic. Yeah, he came down, and I think they arrested him. I don't know. I was like, get me out of here. I got to get out of here. But I can only imagine what those officers were thinking, like, what kind of boss do we have now? He has people living in this area. But anyway, it was a funny story.
Well, you just have, it just goes to show that everybody has family.
Yeah.
And you never know. Because when you're an officer out there and you think, hey, like some of these people you grow up with, that you're like, man, I'd love to come across you out on the street someday, just because like you're just a mope and, we're going to cross paths, and you never do. But one of my traffic stops was a cousin of mine. And I was like, what are you doing over here? And he's like, oh, I'm just helping a friend. And he recognized me right away. And I was like, dude, you need to get out of here, brother. Like, you don't fit in this area. Like, hit the road. But I think he was over there getting illegal substances. But, anyway. But it was weird because I was the only encounter I had with anybody I ever knew. Mm-hmm. I mean, ever. So it was better that way. But anyways, because a lot of people I encountered, I don't want people to know who I am. You know what I mean? In that world. So, because I'll never forget when we were at a grocery store, and you looked at me and said, I arrested that guy. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, back in the day, I arrested that guy. And this guy's oblivious to the world. So that's something I never really feared when I worked on that part of the world. But when I moved, now I'm working where I live. Mm-hmm. And it's like, great. Like, that really bothered me. And I had to take some calls where I'm like, these people may know who I am eventually, but then people are like, hey, you look completely different out of uniform. You don't match that, like you're a different person.
Well, yeah, when people see the uniform more than they see you when you have it on.
Yeah.
I mean, Superman puts on glasses and all of a sudden he's a whole different person.
Exactly, yeah. Right.
You get out of the uniform, you don't have that problem.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Salty Sarge Podcast. Check us out on Facebook or anywhere else you find your favorite podcast. We'll see you on the next one.